Hey, welcome back to another episode of More Big Questions. We're in this series about big questions, but we know that not all of them will be answered on the weekend. Mm-hmm. So we've really just opened up our social media to have people send in questions that are real, they're authentic, and we just want to have a conversation about it. Sherry, thanks for joining me in this episode.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here. There's so much great content. And for those of you that are tuning in for the first time, or perhaps like you've just been joining over the last couple of weeks, just a reminder, these are actually questions that you came up with. And Mark has no idea what these questions are. So we're going to ask him randomly. But before we jump into that, I just wanted to take a moment to brag on how awesome he is. I've never get this opportunity to be able to sit down with Mark as often as we would like to. But man, out of my many years on staff at CCV, I have never had someone write me more encouragement letters. And I know I am not the only one that has received that before. So many staff members talk about that, and it's so cool for me to have a stack with a rubber band saved of encouragement letters from Mark Morin. When I was in high school, man, this guy was answering all of these questions for us too, and it's been such a blessing and an awesome journey for me to be able to grow up in this ministry and also to learn from Mark more. So I'm excited for you guys to be on the receiving end of his blessings that God has given him, his wisdom. So
Very
we'll
kind
just
of you.
jump.
Thank you.
Yes, we'll just jump into it. Thank you. Okay, there's two questions in this first one. So, and then we'll probably dive into some other things as we go into this question. But what happens after death? And do we just live in heaven forever?
Yeah, great question. On one of the earlier episodes, we actually talked about the nature of heaven as a real concrete place. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to just refer back to what happens in heaven for eternity. I'll dip into that a little bit. But cool. The question of what happens between the time a person dies and eternity for everyone. Mm-hmm. So we can call it the second coming. The Greek word is parousia, so sometimes you'll hear people talk about the parousia or the second coming or the end times. Here's as simple as I can really understand it from the Bible, that we live these lives in the body. And when we're born, we have a body, soul, and spirit. Mm. When we are saved by Jesus Christ, our body is not yet redeemed. Our spirit is redeemed. Like in our hearts change. I know a lot of people that used to love to get drunk. They used to love whatever the list is. Their heart has been changed, so they don't want to do that anymore. But their body, their emotions, which is the soul part of you, are still drawn to that. Mm. And so in a real sense, the redemptive work of Jesus on the cross is not yet finished in you. It's redeemed your spirit, but you've got a whole different experience coming in a new body with a transformed soul. So let me tease that apart. Let's say someone dies. You have a loved one, maybe a grandmother or a brother, sister, maybe a friend of yours committed suicide. When they go to heaven through faith in Jesus Christ, through the grace of God, when they go to heaven, they don't yet have a new body, which is a really unnatural state for the spirit and the soul. And so it's this, as you read in Revelation of these saints that have been martyred, they cry out to God, "How long, O Lord?" They're looking for the day when the redemption of Christ is completed. Now, when will that be? When Jesus returns, whenever that is. People have made a lot of guesses. I'm not going to, because so far 100% of them have been wrong.
Absolutely.
And I'm pretty sure I'd be in the wrong category. But when Jesus returns, it will spark a resurrection of all humanity like his resurrection. And when he came out of the grave, he had a physical body. You might recall in John 20, he ate a piece of fish. Well, you can't do that with just a spirit. Mm-hmm. He had a new body, but this is interesting. His new body wasn't limited, apparently, by space, time, or gravity. When he ascended, he just lifted from the earth. And I remember talking to John Wheeler, since gone to be with the Lord. He was an elder in the very first church I served. He was a physicist that actually had worked with Albert Einstein pre-World War II. And wow. I said, man, what was that like? It must have been awesome. And he said, well, if you're talking physics, Einstein, it was amazing. But at a party, he was boring. So there you have it. But that was the level of John's mind. And I said, John, can you imagine the elevator system in the New Jerusalem? Because it's 1,400 miles square.
Right.
He said, what makes you think we're going to need elevators? Because if you have a body like Christ's resurrection body, Philippians 3:21, maybe gravity doesn't have hold on you either. And this is a bizarre thought, but Jesus walked into the upper room. It was locked. The doors were locked. It appears that he walked through the walls. How can you do that?
Right.
Actually, there is more space in your body than matter because of the way electrons, protons, and neutrons work. If you could align your electrons, protons, and neutrons, you could walk through a wall. Problem is we just don't know how to align those.
Right.
But what if in our resurrection bodies we could? So between now and the coming of Christ, those souls that have died, they do not have a body, but they will. And the body, here's all of that I've said. I know I'm running a little long here, but all of that I've said to say this: our new body will be aligned with our renewed spirit, which means the soul, our emotions, our mind that's trapped in between an unredeemed body and a redeemed spirit will now be aligned so that your desires now will be the desires of your new body, your new mind, and your new heart. To me, that's amazing. Now, referencing back to the earlier podcast, the physicality of the new heaven and a new earth. Imagine all you could do with a renewed body. I love learning. I love reading. I love biking. I love hiking. All of those things that we enjoy here, I assume we will enjoy there without the stain of guilt or the taint of a clock that's limiting us. So when we say, oh man, it's been such a great evening, I wish it could last forever. Okay, it will. So what are people doing right now without a body? They're worshiping God, they're observing things going on earth, and they're praying to God for the redemption of those of us on earth.
Wow. That is incredible.
I think so.
No kidding. I've never heard it put that way. Thank you for that. Can you tell us, we've had some viewers ask about reincarnation.
Yeah.
Can you tell us what that is real quickly? And then how does that all tie into what happens after death?
Yes. Reincarnation is particularly a Hindu idea of the Hindu religion, but other religions share it as well. It is this idea that once you die, you actually recycle as another life form. And in the Hindu idea, if you do good in a previous life, you come back as a higher being. If you screw up in this life, you come back as a lower being.
Got it.
So if you're bad, you come back as a snake or a plant or whatever life form.
Sure.
There is nothing in God's word that would affirm that. Nothing. Here's why people have assumed something like reincarnation. Because they have a sense that my spirit is eternal, and it is. But they don't have the resource or the reference to imagine that spirit would be immediately united with God. So in a system of reincarnation, you have to go through thousands of cycles of lives to get better and better and better and better until finally you earn the presence of God.
Wow.
But listen to what the Bible doesn't teach that. It says you get to be in God's presence because of what Christ did for you, not what you do for him. That's why I'm so enamored with the biblical message of salvation, because I don't have to earn my way to God. He came down to me, and that makes way more sense to me because I know my own capacity. And if I have to rely on myself, to quote the old song, to build a stairway to heaven, I'm out.
I'm glad that you brought that up. I think that segues into our next question pretty great. It's not exactly hand in hand, but being alone. Someone asked, like, are some people meant to be alone, or is there somebody out there for everyone? Maybe let's tackle that first one. Like you were talking about how we have Christ, and how does this tie into us being alone? Are we meant to be alone?
Are we meant to be alone? No, absolutely not. But I think the question is, am I meant to be romantically alone?
Yeah.
And so let me tease those apart, because I think we can't imagine being single. Some people can't imagine being single forever.
Sure.
I've got to find someone.
Sure.
And is there one right person out there for me? Do I have a soul mate? I don't think so. And there's nothing in the Bible that says so. And even if it is so, I'm going to teach otherwise. Here's why. A lot of people are looking for that person that will make them happy. That's the wrong way to approach it.
Totally.
You should be looking how to make other people happy, not who will make you happy. Furthermore, a lot of people, I just talked to a friend of mine today he's separated. It looks like they're going to get divorced. And he's already saying, well, clearly she wasn't the right person for me, so I'm going to go find the right person for me. Again, backwards.
Right.
We don't enter into a relationship looking for that person to make us happy. Rather, we look for, how can I serve and be the person the other person needs? So to quote Andy Stanley, if you really want a good relationship, then become the person you're looking for is looking for. Become the person you're looking for is looking for. I think the greatest marriage advice ever given, and it wasn't even marriage advice, is this: do to others as you would have others do unto you. If you just do that without looking for how they can serve me, you're going to have a great relationship. Now, let me talk about the other side of it.
Yes.
What about someone who maybe doesn't have a sexual desire, or maybe has sexual desires that are out of bounds, whether that would be whatever that is, outside of a heterosexual committed monogamous relationship. Sometimes we find ourselves in singleness. And Jesus actually addressed that in Matthew 19. He's talking about marriage because his opponents are trying to trap him. And he made a statement that when you divorce your spouse, specifically men divorcing women, you cause her to become an adulteress. Now, that doesn't mean you make her commit adultery.
Right.
It actually means that when a man divorces a woman, he puts her in the same social status as as an adulteress. Because even though she may be completely innocent, which like none of us are, but let's assume, other men will begin treating her predatorially. She will suffer economically. It was more true in Jesus' day than it is in ours, but typically after divorce, women's status drops by, I think it is 60%.
Wow.
So you're forcing someone that you committed your love to into a position where she's going to be preyed upon, her economics are going to go down, and she'll experience loneliness. And if you have children, often the lion's share goes to women. Not always. I know there's a lot of men that bear that burden.
Yeah.
So after that difficult conversation about marriage, the disciples actually said to Jesus, well, then who should get married?
Right.
Like none of us should get married. And Jesus said, no, some are eunuchs by human hands, like they literally had a surgical procedure. Some are made eunuchs by God. That is, they're born for whatever reason without the sexual desires to drive to a relationship. And some are eunuchs by choice. I don't know where you are. Whoever's asking the question, I don't know where you are. You're probably really lonely. And you come home at night and you wish there was someone that loved you like you want to be loved and someone to love like you want to love them. Let me just challenge you with this. The Apostle Paul in 1 Corinthians 7 said, I wish all of you were as I am. He was single because then you could give yourself wholly to the work of the gospel. Now, it's a painful call, but let me just give you this encouragement.
Thank you.
Can you think of anyone in the Bible that was single?
Paul?
Paul was single. Jesus was single. John the Baptist was single. Listen, if God calls you to this difficult task, it's because he trusts you with it. And you should not be alone in your singleness. Rather, you should throw all of that singleness towards the people of God, towards the ministry that God has for you, that you can do in ways that I cannot and Sherry cannot because of other marital obligations.
Thank you for speaking to really everyone tuning in. We can hear every perspective and every angle. As you were mentioning, heterosexuals, homosexuals, this is actually one of our last questions. We'll just jump to that since we're on this topic. One of the questions was, I have gay friends. Is that a sin? And can they still go to heaven?
So 2 questions in that. I have gay friends. Is that a sin? If you're asking, is it a sin to have gay friends? Of course not.
Yeah.
I mean, Jesus, I never understood this about him. Sinners hung around him
right,
without feeling guilty. Like, I'm not invited to a ton of kegers. I'll just say that. So I think of all the people who should be most open to those struggling with whatever issues of their life, it should be believers. But often we think that our own spirituality is going to be measured by how few non-Christians or non-believers want to be a part of our lives. Okay. So having said that, can homosexuals go to heaven? Absolutely. Because remember, we don't go to heaven because our behavior is right, but what Christ did for us makes us right. Now, I do want to answer the other question. Is homosexuality a sin?
Right.
I want to be very clear. There's a difference between homosexual behavior and same-sex attraction. You can't control who you're attracted to. You cannot.
Right.
If you have same-sex attraction, sometimes that is a product of an environment that was unhealthy. There's great debate whether that is a product of biology. So some would ask, well, if God made me this way, let's assume that's true. If God made me this way, then he must approve of me expressing it. Not true. As a heterosexual male, I have propensity towards adultery. I have propensity towards pornography. I have propensity towards a lot of things.
Can you explain for those of us that don't know what propensity is? What does that mean?
Thank you. I have a bent towards it. I have a draw towards it. So if someone like threw a Playboy magazine at me, I'm going to notice. I'll just say that.
Yeah.
And when I'm alone in a hotel room, there are temptations, just like
anywhere.
Most, heterosexual males anyway, and an increasing number of heterosexual females as well. That doesn't mean that because I have an inclination or a propensity towards that it's okay. And often, whether it's talking about sexuality or deception or anger or overeating, we all have these drives that are biologically based. Just because it's in your biology doesn't mean that it is not a sin.
Right.
So you can't control your desire. You can control your behavior. And I want to make this point as clearly as I can, and I know this is a hornet's nest. I really do. But with all compassion, if God lays out guidelines for our behavior, it's because he loves us and he wants what's best for us. And if the Bible says that same-sex relationships are sin, it is because there's some landmines, there's some hurt and pain that God wants you to avoid. It is my opinion that if someone has same-sex attraction, that by avoiding sex, and you go, wait a second, you tell me not to have sex?
Right.
Yeah, I tell myself that every time I go out of town. I tell teenagers that. Yes, I tell single people that. Not having sex will not kill you.
Right.
Although you're going to feel like you're going to die. And I want to look straight at you right now and say, if you are experiencing same-sex attraction, you go, listen, but if what you're telling me is true, I'll never have sex. I cannot imagine how difficult that is. I cannot imagine how difficult that is. But you know who can? Your Lord Jesus Christ. Because he died at 33 celibate. And he's calling you to a divine calling of celibacy that would actually produce a significant ministry that you cannot imagine unless you resist the temptation. Let me say one more thing about that, because
Please.
I think what has happened, especially in our culture, has been very, very cruel and dehumanizing to the LGBT community.
Let's hear it. What do you got?
We have been convinced that my identity is in my sexuality. We've been friends for, over a decade now.
Mm-hmm.
I know you're female, but I don't call you woman.
Right.
I call you Sherry because you're my friend. I notice that you're a woman, and that's part of your personality, but that's not your identity.
Totally.
And I would pray to God that every person with same-sex attraction would be a human being first and not their attraction to whatever sexuality. Please don't let anyone tell you you are your desires. You're a child of God. You're a son or a daughter of the living God. That's your identity first and foremost.
That reminds me of a training in like a therapy session that my husband and I did with a group of people. And the communicator was asking, he had me stand up in a room and he said, "Who are you?" And he said, "I just want one-word answers." And never once did I say like, "I am female" or "I am woman." I just said believer, like lover, friend, and never did that even come across as my identity, Hopefully I can say things that I'm confident by saying I am happy and joyful and charismatic, whatever. That's how I view myself. But that's very eye-opening to know, like, that is not who I am. Like, just me being a female is not who I am.
Yeah.
There's so much more to that, and Christ is woven all throughout who I am. Thank you.
Yeah, and I know there's a lot of people going to listen in and disagree with my conclusions.
Sure.
I want to be the kind of church that is really inviting, but not affirming. Whatever the issue is, you may disagree with me. I want you to feel comfortable being a part of our fellowship. I want you to feel community. I don't want you to be alone. I don't want you to be ostracized. I don't want you to be judged or condemned.
Totally.
I want you to feel a part of the community, even if you disagree with me. And that's true whether we're talking about a political divide or a sexual ethic or a financial commitment that somebody has. We're going to disagree on some things, but let's not be disagreeable about it.
Yeah.
Because I do know this, if Jesus were in the room and it was filled with homosexuals, he would love them and be loved by them as much as any other category of people.
Thanks for breaking that down for us. We're going to take a hard turn on one of these questions. I really like this one.
Okay.
For those that are just tuning in, these are questions that you have all come up with, and they're random. Mark has not heard any of these, and this is the first time he's hearing this one. Did God create dinosaurs and other things that predate humans by millions of years?
Well, I'll give you my honest answer. I wasn't there, so I don't.
Are you sure?
I don't know. This is one of those, it's an interesting question to me because it's another one of those hot potatoes that is kind of like, should we wear masks?
Okay.
And everyone has their scientific data on their side.
Sure.
And it's really not driven by the science as much as driven by the side of the aisle that you want to be on.
Totally.
Okay. So let me answer a macro question first. I'm not afraid of science. I am totally convinced that the Bible is the Word of God. And I'm totally convinced that science has taught us many things, although the science, especially in recent years, has changed and morphed. So if I'm going to trust one over the other, I'm probably going to lean towards the Bible simply because it has a better track record of being stable, okay? Now to the issue that you're asking. There are, and I've got some friends that would like have a conniption if they heard me say that, so get ready. I don't know how to reconcile a 10,000-year-old earth, and the Bible dates humanity to about 10,000 years, okay? I don't know how to reconcile that with some of the geological data that seems stable to me. I also, as I read the Bible, and this is my area, this is where all my studies have been in, there are ways of faithfully reading Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 with a longer earth. And I know many, it's called, the name just slipped my mind of this view that God created via some of the evolutionary long processes. I do have a problem, though, with billions of years of the earth, and here's why. The second law of thermodynamics, as I understand it, is things naturally go from a state of order to disorder. I've noticed that in my house. I've noticed that with my body. It goes from a state of order to disorder. And the older you get, the older folks in the crowd, like, you feel me, right? So I actually probably would be unpopular with both sides because I don't know how to honestly align the second law of thermodynamics with a world that somehow got better and better and better. Oh, but now it's deteriorating and getting worse and worse and worse. Right. That seems impossible to me without a creator who is infusing order and energy into it. I am certain of this, that the world we have has too much meticulous order to be by random chance. So there is a creator God. How he did it and how long it took, I'm going to plead agnosticism on because I do see contradictory data for the age of the earth, the layers of geology, and people who are way smarter than me are going to email in and say, well, I've got an answer. I bet you do. I think the Genesis account is accurate that God created all this in whatever timing, but there does seem to be some overlap between some of the dinosaurs and some kind of humanoid creature. And you actually see that in Job. I believe it is chapter 39. It talks about Leviathan and Behemoth. Okay. So you can just Google those two, Leviathan and Behemoth, and they're described in pretty specific detail. And some will say, well, the Behemoth must have been a hippopotamus. Nah, it's bigger than a hippopotamus. With the Leviathan, it must have been just like a big sea something. Nope, it's got iron scales that you can't pierce with a spear. So the descriptions in the biblical account of Job, again, it's 38, 39, I'm not sure which of the chapters, doesn't seem to align with any known animal. Now, let me answer the question in one word. I don't know. I wasn't there.
One word. I don't know. I wasn't there.
I'm a theologian, not a mathematician. Thank you for that.
Real quick, what's your favorite dinosaur? Give it to us.
I still got to go with T-Rex, top of the... Well, wait, actually, no. I'm going to change my mind. Velociraptor.
I'm with you.
Here's why. Because I'm not that big a guy, but I still want to be like apex predator.
I dig it. They also, you don't have little arms, but do they have little arms?
I don't know. I wasn't there. One word.
Good point. I like that little callback right there. Wasn't there. Okay. We only have time for, I think, 2 more questions. So we're going to roll through this really quick. Okay. In numerous places within the Bible, it says to fear the Lord. I have trouble doing this because God is a loving God. I honestly don't know how to fear the Lord. Do you have any suggestions?
I do. This word yara is the Hebrew word. It's used over 800 times. And it's this common word. People feared their enemies. People feared oppressors. People feared poverty. But the Bible it commands us to fear the Lord.
Okay.
In fact, of all those 800 uses, take Old Testament and New Testament, of all those 800 uses, you are commanded to fear two things. First is to fear the Lord. You know what the other one is?
What is it?
Nothing. That's beautiful. If you fear the Lord, what else are you going to be afraid of? Right? So now let me answer the question since I put it in perspective. The fear of the Lord is not terror. Even 1 John says that the love of God casts out all fear.
Yep.
The fear that it casts out in context is fear of judgment. So you don't have to fear that God is going to judge you. You don't have to fear that God is going to destroy you. But I promise you, well, let me circle around it this way and say, every person that met God, whether it's Moses or Abraham or Elijah or Isaiah, every person that met God, they fell down as though dead. Like that's a repeated phrase in the Bible. They fell down as though dead.
Mm-hmm.
Trust me, if you met God, you would fall down as though dead. Not because you're afraid he will destroy you, but because he is awesome. And I use that word correctly, not like a teenager, like,
Yes.
Oh, it's awesome, dude. No, he is awesome. In the same way, if you're driving down the freeway and a thunderstorm comes and lightning strikes, like right next to you, you will be terrified because lightning is awesome. You're not really afraid of being electrocuted. You're not really afraid of the loud sound. You're just afraid because of its power. So let me summarize it this way. When my kids were young, I wanted them to fear me because if they didn't, they could likely die. I didn't want them to be terrified that I would hurt them.
Sure.
But I wanted them to have a fearful respect of my power and authority so that they could be healthy and safe. That's what the Bible calls you to when it says to fear the Lord. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And if you want to do that, just do this experiment. I did it, it was in my mid-20s. I went into the middle of a church building at night. I was the pastor, so I had a key. And I just began to worship God by telling him everything he did and everything he was. I followed the pattern of revelation. God, this is what you did. And God, this is who you are. Within 30 minutes, I was flat on my face in the middle of the aisle, loving God more than I'd ever loved him and fearing God more than I'd ever feared him.
Can you tell me real quick, you mentioned Yaras at the beginning of that.
Yara.
Yara. What is that exactly?
It's the Hebrew word fear.
Fear.
Yara.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah.
Yara. Thank you. Okay. Let's go with this last one.
Okay.
If God knows everything that is going to happen, what is the point of asking him for things?
Oh, that's such a good question. Because you actually can move him to action.
How so?
Well, let me give you an example. Moses, God was so frustrated with the Israelites at one point, he was going to destroy them. And Moses pleaded with God. He said, God, don't do that, because if you do that, like all the other nations are going to look and say, yeah, he led his people out into the desert and then wiped them out. What kind of God is that? For your own honor, don't do that. And God, I'm not going to say God changed his mind. I am going to say that Moses persuaded him not to do what he was going to do. Now, did God know that was going to happen? Yeah, probably.
Sure.
Jesus said, ask, seek, and knock. Ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you'll find. Knock and the door will be open to you. He didn't say, ask and you will get what you're already going to get. Seek and you'll find what was already there. Knock and you'll realize the door was already be opened. No, God actually is moved by your prayers. Not in a sense that he's controlled by you. I'll tell you one story to close out. When my daughter was moving from her teenage years into her adult years, she had a financial difficulty. I had the money and I had the willingness to take care of her problem, but I needed her to ask. And all she had to do was say, Dad, can you help me? and I would have paid the whole bill. Your God wants you to be responsive to him. And sometimes he waits until you respond before he makes a move, so that you will become overtly dependent on him, and so that you will do life together. He doesn't want to do life for you, over you. He wants to do life through you. So ask, seek, and knock, and you will see things happen that would not have happened unless you asked or sought or knocked.
That's supposed to be a microphone that just dropped. Imagine that. Imagine that. That is all we have. Is there anything else that you would like to just kind of tag us out and share with anybody that's tuning in?
Yeah, I would thank you all for asking questions. They have been really fun to answer. And as a reminder, some of the questions are difficult, and you may say, I disagree. You know what? That's okay.
Yeah.
I totally get that. This is not to be the definitive answer, although you did drop a mic. It is to be a conversation.
Yeah.
And more than anything, we just want to model for you what it looks like to think through some of these difficult issues. And we want to model for you a church that's not afraid of difficult questions, because we know you have them.
Yep.
And if you have ongoing difficult questions, please, please, please don't leave them unanswered. You can go to any of our campuses and find a campus pastor or one of the associate pastors. We have a specific structure in place that gives people one-on-one attention.
Yep.
I know it feels like we're a big church, and Ashley's just one person, I'm just one person, and we may not be as accessible to you. But whatever campus you're on, there are people, anyone with a badge, anyone with a name on them can take you to a person who would be as happy as I am and is qualified to either answer the question or find an answer for the question, but at least start the conversation.
I love that. I love that. And I believe that God made us as individuals to wonder. He created us to wonder. So it's important to ask these questions. And hey, thank you for letting me be a part of this. Thank you for talking us through all of this. And thank you all for your questions and joining us with More Big Questions with Mark Moore.
God bless, guys.